Hello, viewers. Welcome to this episode of the Citizens Chat Show. Well, two topics inform our discussion this afternoon. The first is you may know that Uganda is a multi-nation state. There are many nations within the same country, but the beauty is that in that diversity, we should be able to coexist and live together as one country or one people. Now, the question of Balaalo in northern Uganda that has become a source of conflict among the local community there. And, the president issued directives that the Balaalo should leave that part of northern Uganda. We don't know if that has been adhered to. A committee was established specially to look into the issue therein. We don't know if the report is out or is yet to be released for public consumption. But what we know for sure is that the conflict continues to brew and, difference continues to inculcate among the community right there. But also the second part of this afternoon shall be informed by the standoff in Parliament. We know that the opposition, led by Right Honorable Mathias Mpuuga, has decided to boycott parliamentary sittings for now. I think close to 2 weeks or a week or somewhere around there. And their demands around human rights violations, government accountability of allegedly missing citizens, are some of their demands. And before these are met, they shall not return to the House. Well, that boycott also is part of our discussion. And to put all this into perspective, viewers, is an eminent panel that is still small in number, but shall grow as the show continues. To the extreme left is a face you've seen on this show before, and that is the gentleman from the National Resistance Movement Secretariat and its Director for External Relations, retired Major Awich Pollar. Happy to have you.
Greetings to our viewers. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. We are happy to have you. Next to myself is the able Dr. Sarah Bireete, who is the Executive Director of Center for Constitutional Governance here in Uganda. I also must mention that so far both panelists are lawyers. Doctor, we are very happy to have you.
Thank you for inviting us or having us back, and good afternoon, viewers.
Yes, we expect more panelists to join us along the way, and as they do, I shall introduce them and begin to pick their thoughts right away. So let's begin with the standoff in Parliament. And Doctor, I'll just begin with you. Opposition. This is not the first time that they are walking out of Parliament. It is not the first time they are expressing that discontent in that manner. Has the previous standoffs yielded results, and should they continue with this kind of approach towards addressing issues of human rights?
Well, the opposition has presented 8 demands that they require from the executive in this current walkout. One of the demands is an apology in the manner in which the president or the principal of the National Unity Platform was mishandled at the airport, and the siege around the NUP offices on Independence Day and disruption of prayers. The second demand is the accountability for 18 missing persons. And that's arising from the report, the latest report of the Human Rights Commission, where the National Unity Platform had petitioned the Human Rights Commission for 30 missing persons. The commission was able to identify 12 and confirmed that 18 are still missing. Among the 18 persons is the Bosco Chubalama, I think is the most popular name, or the name that stuck in my mind, is among the 18 missing persons, and he has been missing for now 4 years. The other demand is on the report on the killing of Muslims in this country. And it's important to note that this week, I think there was an attempted murder of a sheikh in central Uganda, I think in Chiboga. So the murder of sheikhs has been with us for about 10 years. Whenever they are murdered, the government says they are investigating, and they've never released the report. So that's among the demands. You've been investigating the murder of sheikhs in this country. where is the report, partial or complete? Where is it? It's something that has gone on for consecutively about 5 years. The other demand is the report of the Kampala killings and actions of government. Government confirmed that 54 people were killed. They promised by then to compensate the families with 50 million shillings. The only family that has got a concrete promise is the family of Mukisa that petitioned the court, and money was awarded by Justice Sekan about a month ago. And this is 3 years from the November 18-19 killings. So what should happen to the families of the victims of brutality? So those are among the key demands. The other demands include disruption of opposition activities in the country. And even today, the women members of parliament from the opposition were appearing before the Presidential Affairs Committee, having petitioned the committee over harassment by the resident district commissioners whenever they have their activities, and they are treated as people who don't deserve to host any activities in their own constituencies and districts. And notable among those disruptions was the disruption of women MPs' activities. Opposition women MPs were not allowed to celebrate Women's Day with their members in the district, constituent members. And that targeted harassment is among the issues that are being raised for government response. What I find disturbing, however, is the conduct of the executive on the issue of missing persons. Of course, on all the human rights violation issues being raised. But if I may start with the issue of missing persons, citizens have surrendered national data to the NIRA through the national identification process, where people's details are taken: grandparents, parents, village, fingerprints, color, skin color, color of the eyes, the bio details of almost all citizens aged 16 years and above have been collected by government. So we can put the collection rate at about 90, because I want to assume that there are some Ugandans, for a few reasons, who have not taken their bio details through the national identification process. So if a person is missing, take an example of John Bosco Chibarama, and his village is mentioned. What stops government from going into the national data archives and you enter John Bosco Chibarama with his village and you get the rest of the details that you need? What stops government? Two, then the Human Rights Commission stated that they did not have details of the 18, including NIN numbers, next of kin, village, among others. And the next day, the National Unity Platform took a bus full of relatives of the 18 missing persons with all their details, including passports. And it will be interesting to see what response the commission will give, because the excuse they gave was that they didn't have enough details. Now they got next of kin and so many family members. It wasn't just next of kin. They have national ID details, they have passport details, and all the other details of the 18 missing persons. So it will be interesting to watch what kind of report the commission will come up with, given that they have unlimited jurisdiction to investigate and search all detention centers in Uganda, both illegal and illegal detention centers. Illegal detention centers, I refer to places like Makinde, where most of the barracks, where most of NUP supporters are being held, yet they are not soldiers. CMI custody, a place that is not gazetted detention center for citizens. spaces like CMI Detention Holding Center in Chireka, where some people say they've been tortured, is not a gazetted detention center in this country, and many others. So these are some of the illegal centers where most of the opposition members are held. And I think government needs to account, and I support the opposition walkout.
Retired Major, the demands being raised by opposition. I don't know, what is government doing about them?
Well, first of all, the walkout itself. The walkout is a good thing. It's one of the democratic means of expression in a democratic dispensation where you have opposition members of parliament. It happens all over the world, in the UK, in America, everywhere else. You can express your dissatisfaction by way of debate. You object to the matter on the floor. You can you raise your objection on the matter in the country or in the house by way of voting. You can vote that thing out. Now, on the issue of opposition walking out of parliament, it's a practice all over the world. In a democratic dispensation where you have opposition members of parliament, there are many avenues of expressing their position. One of them is to vote against the motion or on the floor. Another one, that is by consensus or whatever method of voting. The other one is to physically debate and oppose it by word of mouth. But the other one is also to show a walkout. It happens in the UK, in America, and everywhere. So it's not strange, but it's a way of expression. It also shows that the country is democratic, and that is good for us as a sign of democracy. But maybe the other thing that you'd want to look at is the effect on legislation. The effect on legislation would be, for example, if you're out and government has a majority vote, business will be transacted, because the law does not demand that when opposition is out, you don't legislate. So if you have a clear majority, you do it. Like in our case, we have a clear majority. But I don't think that is a line NRM would want to toe, that we have a majority and therefore ignore the views of the opposition. Otherwise, we'd transact business, we'd pass laws. But I think in the democratic system, the leadership of parliament and plus the leader of government business, which is a government side, would want to address that. On the issue of what government is doing on the claims, as Sarah listed many claims, definitely a matter raised to government will be addressed. But the matter concerning missing persons here has been a point of controversy. And I think that is why the people who investigated said they couldn't prove it. Because it's not enough to just bring a claim at my door and ask me to disprove. The law says that he who alleges has a burden to prove. If that was not the case, anybody would come and say 10,000 people are missing. Then government would struggle to prove that they are actually not missing. Therefore, prudency and due diligence should be put to say, if you say the Okello is missing, then you prove that that Okello actually existed, and indeed he existed, and at a particular time he went missing. So the feelings from government was that many people who were, and this started when Honorable J.J. Odongo was Minister of Internal Affairs. The feeling was that the opposition were just laying claims and giving it to government to disprove. That is not how it should work. It should be that he who claims proves it. But therefore, the only ingredient is the false claim that appears to be it. But if it is true that people are missing, then you have to look for, if it is proved they are missing, that is from where is alleging, then the burden now will shift to government to see, is he somewhere in German comfortable? Is he somewhere working in Kenya or somewhere? Or is he really in the hands of the state? In which case, if it's in the hands of the state, we all know that Article 44 puts 4 things which is mandatory. Freedom from torture, freedom from, right to a fair hearing, and then freedom from slavery. And the other one is habeas corpus. Bring the body here. So, about the missing persons in particular, it will be handled, and all other claims. But I'd like to conclude in this segment by saying, whatever is happening is an inherent contradiction that happens in all societies. And as I indicated earlier, that walkout is everywhere. For example, I keep repeating this. You take a country like Sweden, you'd think everything is perfect. But in my experience in the UN body where we have civil society, if Sweden comes and narrates you the contradiction that exists, take for example even asylum seekers, the civil society in Sweden will tell you the violations there in asylum seeking alone, or what they call children from poor family. You know, some of us think there is no poor family in Sweden. So the point I'm trying to say here is that contradictions that exist in terms of debate with opposition and claims of violation of human rights are things that will continue to be with us, because a society is not a dream utopian society. Here we are having antagonistic forces for those who have acquired power through democratic means in election, and those who want the same power. So all that matters for us now is, do we have mechanisms and systems in place to arbitrate contradictions that emanate in Uganda? And I think we have those mechanisms. But to imagine, or like colleagues want to shout like it's a failed state, or it's unmanageable point, or it's that alarming, I just want to say we shall continue to have these democratic ingredients of walk out and walk in. We shall continue to have cases of alleged violations or even real violations, not on alleged but real. And that is why we are put in place as government the law which says if you are a state officer, like a police, you go to do work and you break somebody's testicle, the ethno defense of Attorney General does not stand. That police have broken somebody's testicles in the course of my duty, sue Attorney General. No, the law now says you who did it personally be responsible, not to hide under the defense of Attorney General. And this one I'm mentioning because I want to repeat that we are not going to have a perfect society. All that matters is self-inbuilt mechanism to sort all these issues. And it is applicable to all the other issues raised by opposition.
Just a question, Mr. Moderator.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I found out you state that whoever alleges that their persons are missing must prove. What kind of proof do you envisage in this situation?
I want to prove that you have not, say, for example, brought ghost names. You have not said Okello Peter is missing when actually there is no Okello Peter. What would you do if somebody brought 30 ghost names and said, these are missing? Would you go panicking as government and say, oh, there are 30 missing?
Doesn't the state have capacity to verify ghosts?
Yeah, that is, for me, that is actually where, and you see,
if the state verifies, the person who is alleging will continue to say, because it is easy for the state to investigate and say, we don't know those people. But the person alleging will not be convinced, because the state will simply say, we have checked and we don't see Okello Peter. That is the only thing the state will do. We have checked, we don't see Okello Peter. So you who is saying Okello Peter exists, you prove Okello Peter actually existed.
Okay, I want to bring in Chris. Chris, yes, we are discussing the opposition walkout and their 8 demands, which include government must respond to the issue of missing persons, among others. I don't know. Do you think the opposition side is handling the issue well, in your view?
one thing you need to know, that opposition in this country is weak. And so their strategies are going to emanate from around strategies that the weak engage strong regimes and maybe authoritarian regimes. And one of the strategies is either to walk out, you know, like foot dragging. You show you're complying with a particular measure, like they took up their seats in parliament. And you know, even when they took up their seats in parliament, like Major Awich says, they are, in terms of balance of numbers, the opposition in Uganda has very little numbers. So what then are the strategies of the weak? The strategies of the weak is to comply and decomply. You see, you take up your seats and see what you can use, how you can use that kind of arrangement within the parliament to voice your concerns. Because there is a whole structure which, if you do not take up those seats, like office of the leader of opposition, oversight committees, and some of these. So you'll definitely miss out on that. However less impactful it may be, it would be very important to take them up. Now, if you take them up and you find that it is not working, then you also need to still look at another strategy. You can choose to decomply and say, let us walk out from this parliament, because complying in this parliament, we've tried to show to the entire world that as opposition, we are reasonable enough. We've still gone ahead to take up seats, but the people who are in charge of those seats or in charge of the structure we're engaging in, such as parliament, seem not to be doing their side of the bargain. For example, what eventually broke the back of the camel, which is the incident where they were supposed to play evidence in parliament regarding the state of the country. So,
And the video went missing.
And the video went missing. And don't let anyone lie to you. The most competent Ugandans are actually in the public service. They are very competent, very technical. What does that therefore mean? It means that they have people who have the capacity to play those videos, but only that the politics of the day rendered them, portrayed them as incompetent, whereas the real issues behind is that it would be damaging if played.
That they had played the video of Chinyamata the previous day.
Yes. So you see, so let me tell you, when you're dealing with very strong authoritarian regimes like Uganda, you're actually dealing with very bigger situations such as apartheid. You're dealing with the structural violence such as like the discrimination of the blacks in America. So so when you're assessing the strategies, because at some point people were even criticizing Malcolm X, that he's a very erratic character leading a black struggle. But what did people say? That in this world you need all categories of people if you're going to change your situation. So you need a Martin Luther King who will speak very nice English and eloquently present your cause. But then you'll also need someone like someone like Malcolm X to give the aggressive dimension of the struggle. Likewise, in South Africa, we had the ANC, the Cyril Ramaphosa's, and all these other people negotiating with the apartheid regime, while there was movement of troops in the Nkoto Wesizwe. So when you're dealing with the very complex regimes, you need to have strategies that work. In Uganda, I think walking out in parliament is a very normal thing. This is not even the first time in Uganda. Opposition, this is perhaps the 100th time the Ugandan, as long as the struggle of democracy has been happening in Uganda, this is almost the 100th time that we've had walkouts in parliament. But even in more advanced democracies like America, where people even use other non-compliant strategies like filibusters. Someone gets up and speaks just to buy time, filibustering, as long as he achieves his aim. So me, I don't think opposition should be faulted for what they have done. What they are doing are desperate measures, and desperate times require desperate measures. I wanted to respond to Major here who mentioned Article 44 and the writ of habeas corpus. Now, for me, my understanding of habeas corpus, and also when he links about the whole question of proof, that you have to prove, I don't think, when I read that judgment of ex parte Matovu, the judge was either Udo Doma Udo Doma. Now, what did Udo Doma, of course, Be Nice had raised a preliminary objection that first of all, the pleadings of Abubakar Mayanja, who was Matovu's counsel, were faulty. What did Udo Doma say? And that is the principle of habeas corpus and non-derogation of rights. Now, this is what he said. He said that this is the life of a citizen. And you know why? The relationship between a citizen and the state is social. It's a social contract. That is a very important. And one of it is protecting the citizen. You see? So if then the citizen of the queen, the subject of the queen is missing, the queen must be concerned and the body must be presented alive or dead. Now, those are very strong statements when I interpreted them. It means that a relationship between a citizen and the state arises out of a social contract. And what is the social contract? I will give you my taxes and then in return provide me security. Therefore, if I'm insecure, it is not again the burden of proof. It is again not my burden of proof to prove that I am insecure. You see? Those are already duties of the citizen. The state must have a profile of all its citizens. We have national identification. We have all these others. So if the state therefore thinks that there are names that are being conflated, then they should also use within their records and speak with evidence. But otherwise, I think it is only in Uganda, and I forget the case, it is only in Uganda where we've watered down Article 44 and particularly the principle of habeas corpus. We've really made it so simple. In fact, around 2016, Mama Mbabazi campaign, when Christopher Ine disappeared, I remember there was a judgment around that which kept everyone's mouth was completely wondering what has happened to this kind of watering down such a sacred legal principle. Yeah.
Thank you. That's a very deep context. Yes, Doctor, you want to respond to what?
No, just to add and maybe respond to a few issues raised by Awich. The procedures of reporting missing persons in Uganda are very clear. You wait for 24 hours, you go to police, you state why you think your person is missing. You state they are known, last known the whereabouts and where they are likely to be. That is all that is required of a citizen. So to prove that the person is missing, there is no such thing, and not at least in our laws.
Yeah.
This is what the law requires.
That
You
is
wait for
article-
24 hours. The penal code,
No,
I don't know the particular section. This is penal code. I will get the particular section. You wait for 24 hours because before 24 hours, you never remember a person is
Reasonable
dead
time.
somewhere and what. Then you state their last known whereabouts and where they are likely to be, and maybe they are close associates. That's where the law stops. And then the state does its work. So it's not the other way around. In this case, people were asked for NIN numbers, passport details. They've offered them. That's why I'm saying that the next institution to watch closely on the case of missing persons is the Human Rights Commission. They've provided more details than required by law. Given by the data in custody of NIRA, all you need to prove that a person exists is a name and village. The rest of the details are there. In custody of government. Our data protection law is very clear on usage of information citizens have given to the government, like in departments like NIRA or passport office. So that shouldn't be the burden of citizens. Second, I want to underscore the fact that it's the duty of the state to protect its people and the boundaries of their nation. Protection of citizens and the territorial integrity of a country is the job of a state. Once the people occupying the state are failing to do this job, then they are wanting in their responsibilities. And it's not the other way around. So we cannot reverse this duty. Protection of people and their property and protection of the territorial integrity of Uganda.
The duty of the state.
Yes, we cannot reverse this duty. The third issue I want to underscore before we let off this debate is that the dent created by human rights violations and the casual approach by the ruling party is yet to be determined. But as we talk now, the North Korea embassy is closing in Uganda. Norwegian embassy is closing next year. We expelled the Democratic Governance Facility and UN Human Rights Office because of our petty politics and toxic environment in Uganda. As a result, you see the advisory. I know that the approach of the government has been to tell off the US through the advisory the State Department has given to its citizens. I think, first of all, it's important to acknowledge that the US State Department was communicating to its people. That communication is directed at US citizens, US businesses, and associates. As a consequence, Uganda is mentioned because the people are being warned about Uganda. But the primary targets of the statement were never Ugandans. But how do we react? As if the US has no obligation to its people. So we think that every government should be careless, the way we are careless about our citizens. The other people are taking care of their citizens and where they should go and what to expect. We are bombasting them, but that advisory has impact on how the world perceives Uganda today, on the future investments in this country. And gradually, our economy is going to cripple because of the carelessness and impunity of people occupying public offices in this country.
Retired Major, as you come to respond to some of these concerns being raised, I want to make reference to what the State Minister for Internal Affairs mentioned on the floor of Parliament, the Honorable General David Muhoozi. He said that regarding the issue of missing persons, he has nothing more to add on to it. That his initial statement that said that some of these people don't exist, some of them are being doctored, sort of, that the opposition is only using this to try and taint government. So I don't know, have we reached a point where government has failed to resolve the issue of missing persons, but also the human rights allegations, that how the Honorable Chagulanyi was picked from Entebbe Airport, among others. I don't know how can we get to the bottom line of upholding human rights?
Now, on the issue of the minister's statement, I'm just happy that I'm almost saying the same thing he's saying. I had told you about the fear for presentation of ghost people. And for clarity, I had never heard of what the minister had said. I was just being honest in my talk.
Can I just provide information? Sorry to disrupt you, Awich. I find it, the casual presentation by the current Minister of State for Internal Affairs, who happens to have presided over the emergence of drones as a CDF. Drones that kidnapped people were operated by soldiers when General Muhoozi was a CDF of the army. He should actually be knowing. First of all, he's the one who introduced drones by vicarious liability because he was the head of the army. Drones were operated by soldiers. He's the CDF. Were they introduced? Why did they kidnap people? And where did they take them? He's the first person that should be held criminally liable for missing persons.
So I was saying that my initial presentation, which Sarah tried to say, as I put the burden of proof, was that in a political dispensation where there's contestation of power, and where our opposition seem to play for the gallery of the funders and the donors and foreign powers, it's very easy for anybody to allege that, I give the example, Okello Peter or Tumewaze John exist when it doesn't. And if due diligence is done by government to check these particulars and they don't find, like in the case that 18 were not found, then that is it. And that's what the minister is saying. You are just alleging the non-existent Okello Peter, the non-existing Tumewaze John, to tell to the world that these people are missing. Why not? And that is why we are saying, if we as government have failed to find out, then you who is saying, tell us. And when we say that, you said we are throwing the burden to you, but you throw it to us. We try to find, and we don't find. And yet, people can continue to make ghost names to appease donors, to appease foreign powers that people are missing. The ones that are there can be found. The other thing I want to comment about is, you have
does
given
that
me enough
include
information.
Bosco Chubarama, whom the Prime Minister says she knows where he was and was a former employee of URA? Are we also regarding him as a ghost? Because he's among the 18.
I want the flow of my presentation like you did yours flowing. So I will respond to that later so that I don't disrupt my flow. I want to comment about my brother's use diction, his choice of word, that in a strong authoritarian state like in Uganda, I hope the choice of diction is not to imply dictatorship. But if you imply a strong state, I'm happy. We should have a strong state. Because some people actually tend to sift goalposts and argue that we have a failed state. How can we have a failed state when we actually have a strong state? But if it is for the choice of word for dictatorship, I like to assure our viewers that this government is birthed by popular election, voted by the majority of people, with the three arms of government, the legislature, the executive, the judiciary, and the executive. So we are in a, but the authoritarianness, the strong state, I would plead guilty, because a government should have a strong state, because a strong state is meant to protect its people, but not an authoritarian. The other thing I want to comment about is
authoritarian regime.
The other thing I wanted to comment about is your response to habeas corpus. It's me who brought it. And I brought it in good faith because I am the state for the sake of this debate, because I am the ruling party and the ruling party forms a government. So I am the state. Now, I brought it out as a tool of judicial remedy, as a tool to augment democracy. If I knew it was bad for me, I wouldn't have spared myself. I can't pick a spear to spare myself. I know it works, and it has been working, and it should continue to work. Now, Sarah talks about the processes of reporting missing persons. Yes, if you have reported, you have done your part. Then if we have done our part and we found not there, what do? Maybe you would give better and further particulars, and that better and further particulars is what now turns out like a burden to you. You have reported within the limitation of the law, or within the requirement of the law. We have done our part, and we don't see. What do? Do you say that if a ghost person is reported, you must bring it? Government must bring it. You must bring it even if a ghost person is reported. We tell you, we said we have tried. We did. The checklist are there. The checklist put by government, check with NERA, check with this, check is this. We have a checklist. If we have followed the checklist and we don't find it, then we tell you. But it seems the feeling is that whether I bring a ghost name or not, please fine. In fact, not only that you even want me to fine, but you know that I will not fine. You want me to fail so that you tell the foreign first. You see, donors, you have seen, they have failed. You actually knew I would fail to fine because it was a ghost. The other thing is the close of embassies. Embassies do close. I got this from the other day when I was at a burial in Buteleja. Somebody sent to me a WhatsApp about the close of Norwegian embassy. I replied him a WhatsApp saying there are two scenarios that bring a closure. One is a wrong bilaterals. That is a bilateral between Uganda and the other country. The other is a policy matter of the ministry. If Uganda had a bad relationship with Norway, it can lead to a severing of diplomatic relations. In this case, it was not. But sometimes foreign ministries, including Uganda, we have ever phased out embassies. Like we once removed from Cuba, we have just put it back. Then you decide to say, let us have one in Tanzania. The Tanzanian embassy will control Mozambique, Zambia,
then
and
also we sold off our embassy properties.
So the closure of embassies, in the case of Norway, it was explained that it had nothing to do with any bad bilateral relationship with Uganda. It is a general policy in Norway that they are phasing off some embassies and adding others. So you would find like the Norwegian embassy in Nairobi will control Uganda, control Rwanda, Burundi, and others. Just like Cuban embassy.
In simple terms, we are no longer an important player to those countries.
You see, if you do that, Sarah, then if you look at it like that, then you risk being the theory of a half empty glass or full glass. Like you have a glass of water. It is a halfway. If you ask me, is this glass full? What is this glass? A positivist Awich will say that glass is a half full. A negativist Sarah will say that glass is a half empty. It means the same thing, but it talks of our attitudes towards life. If you have a positive attitude towards life, you will look at the glass as a half full. If you have negative attitudes, we look at it as a half empty. So, in the case, like Cuba, I repeat, Cuba's embassy in Uganda controls Uganda, Rwanda, and Burundi. So it is at the discretion of a country to choose where to place an embassy. So Norway is reorganizing. Same thing with North Korea. North Korea is the ambassador is my friend. I communicate with him. So he told me how they are doing it. And many countries do it, including Uganda. So there's no big deal about closure of embassies. Unless you know that it is a bilateral gone bad. No, none of it. Finally, on the issue of the U.S. statement, the U.S. statement was somebody's views. He collected it on his own. And when he collected it on his own, I have it here. The last statement he says, here, he says, read with me. You may think I'm reading my own thing.
It's a State Department. It's not any person's view.
This advisory, you look at it, don't think it is my words. This advisory is explanatory only and does not have the force of law. It does not supplement or modify statutory authorities, executive orders, or regulations. It is not intended to be, nor should be interpreted as comprehensive or imposing requirement. It's just an ordinary statement.
It's an advice. It's an advice.
Anybody's advice.
No, it's
so
an advice of the State Department to their citizens.
You just read here.
What's the title? It's an advice to their citizens.
It's an advice. So why would we bother so much about somebody's advice about this? You can advise me, I can ignore it. So whoever has advised a friend would advise that. After all, he made a disclaimer here.
Yeah, but
No, what is the title? What is the
title
title?
is-
The title is U.S. Business Advisory, Risk and Consideration. for
So this
Business
is
in
advisory.
Uganda.
For their citizens.
So I like
Okay,
to tell
but,
the viewers
yes,
that
others to get
please,
back
in
to-
as far as this statement of advice is concerned, even the author says it's just advice, and I've read it here.
Okay.
So
Thank you,
we
retired
have to
major. Thank you, retired major. Chris, I want to bring you in because amidst all this is the Ugandan out there. Because Parliament is supposed to be, or is in fact, the people's house. So amidst the pull and pulls from government and opposition, where does that leave legislation? Where does that leave the people's house?
That is actually supposed to be a symptom of the nature of state we have. Because Major here was saying that Uganda has a strong state. But you know, in what you call a democracy, a democratic state must have very strong rule of law institutions. So by the fact that there is already a problem of confidence, what Chirundachi, to use Chirundachi Benjinja's word, crisis of confidence. So it means that Parliament is already placed at a position where it has a crisis of confidence. But that crisis of confidence is actually just supposed to mean that the people who are running Parliament are not attuned to the views of citizens. Because whether you like it or not, you have a majority. The NRM has a majority in Parliament. But you know, consent can also be manufactured. Noam Chomsky talked about manufacturing consent. Our own Professor Lokonyango also wrote controlling consent. So when you look at the NRM gigantic election figures, percentages, that one, the fact is the way Parliament operates and the way state institutions and the crisis of confidence in all institutions of the state, including the leadership of the country, is just supposed to show you that the country itself needs to reform, search its soul, because we can't pretend that the country is okay. Economically, I am not sure. As for me, economically, I feel the pinch in my pocket. I can't say the country economically is working. Politically, you see people walking out of Parliament. The country is politically failing, you see. Then socially also, there are a lot of disruptions, arguments over whether there should be nyege or not. You know, what should be the social fabric and social culture of the country is also a very big problem. And even if Major Awich talks about a disclaimer in his document, but you know very well that this disclaimer, this statement advisory, is emanating out of a fallout between Uganda and US in terms of values, issues around LGBTQ right, and the laws that we passed.
They mentioned 4 things.
Yes, in fact, even the very
corruption,
introduction.
Human rights.
Yes.
Compromised institutions, especially judicial and parliament.
Yeah.
And then LGBTQ is number 4.
And then, so generally, the country is not working.
And of course, then violence.
Yeah, the country is not working. Every day I see abuses on members of parliament, and then you actually, sometimes, by the way, me, I even just pity the political class of Uganda. How can you impose yourself where you're not wanted? The amount of abuse that citizens abuse their leaders, just do a survey on social media. You'll actually see that the political elite of the country and the masses are not attuned. They are not moving together, you see. People are not eating. School fees is a problem. You see, education has collapsed in Uganda because private schools are now poaching on parents, you see. So virtually, and you see, the same parliament has even not addressed that. So what is parliament? Because I need to make us understand, first of all, the context of what is a parliament. Parliament actually comes as a result of our transition to representative democracy. Because because of population, we cannot now practice direct democracy. So that representative democracy is what we should actually see in parliament. So we need to see parliament concerned about citizens. But if it is the parliament, again, that fails to even play evidence on citizens, then do you think that citizens will love that parliament? You see? We need to see parliament that is passing progressive laws, laws that touch on the livelihood of people, you see? Meaning, as a country, we have failed to build a state. And I don't also want Major Awich to feel bad. It is not only the entire fault. Of course, NRM, everyone really knows. Even him, he can agree with me.
61% of our independent Uganda.
80%. Even Major Awich will agree with me that 80% of the problems of Uganda is NRM.
Yes, and they've occupied 61%
but 20,
of post-independent Uganda.
But 20% we also take responsibility. No, let us agree. You take the 80%. You know, this is, by the way, Pareto. This is Pareto principle, 80-20, Pareto principle.
Okay, I'm just to wrap up and take a short commercial break, but I'll give us all a chance to really suggest the way forward. But Sarah, I will begin with you, and as you give us your parting shots on this, is that the Deputy Speaker of Parliament has extended an olive branch to the opposition, and is saying, let us talk about these issues and try to address them. However, Parliament, by its rules of procedure, has the latitude to proceed for as long as the majority are in fact present. So it means that the absence of opposition in Parliament has no impact on legislation. There is no direct impact. So it means that what the Deputy Speaker is doing is out of just courtesy and goodwill, but it did mean that the absence of opposition would stall Parliament from proceeding. So do you think that maybe in the future we need to review that Parliament should be able to okay, not come to a standstill, but both sides have to be present when Parliament is either passing a law or something. So I don't know. Do you think there is a legal lacuna a bit there?
So we run a risk of saying this is now an NRM Parliament. Article 75 of the Constitution prohibits a one-party state. So as much as the laws are not expressed, and that's why the presiding officer is concerned, even if the laws say we go by numbers, we don't go by political shades. But I think as we entrench our multi-party dispensation, we need to reach a time when we say both sides of the aisle should be represented. That's the most ideal. For now, we are saying we go with the numbers. But we run a risk of saying, for example, if you pass the law today, the citizens can say this is an NRM law. You will have it, in the books of as a law of Uganda. But if a law is not acceptable by the people can boycott that law, that policy or regulation. So we run that risk. Yes, technically you can proceed, but is it something desirable? But also I hope the next parliament, because each parliament makes its rules of procedure, I hope the next parliament can amend and say both sides should be represented. Because we are not dealing with one homogeneous side of Ugandans. If you are acting on behalf of Ugandans, who are these Ugandans? There are different shades, should be part of that decision. And that's why the August House exists. Although the rules of procedure are saying they go with the numbers.
Okay, so way forward on...
Way forward, any country that is not rooted in the principle of rule of law is headed for anarchy. The opposite of rule of law is anarchy. There is no way you're going to twist it. So once we don't have respect for the Constitution, our Constitution in Article 23 states clearly the manner of arrest of all citizens. It also gazettes. Citizens must be in gazetted centers. So once you deploy drones, like General David Moss did as CDF, we saw drones which were confirmed to be coming from CMI. CMI is under the army, the UPDF in Uganda. You deploy drones to kidnap people. We have numerous videos on social media on how Ugandans were kidnapped. You cannot then wake up and say this is a fallacy, these are ghosts, and you want to wash your hands away from it. This is evidence. Pregnancy cannot be hidden with hands. Why did you divert from the manner of arrest? Let's assume the people committed crimes. Why do you divert from the constitution in a manner of arrest? So NRM created anarchy during elections. Some people were tortured, others were killed because they are diverting from the constitution. So once we do not all abide by the laws of the land, we are headed for anarchy. There is no two way around it.
So rule of law is the way forward. Let's respect the law. Yes,
I am kind of intrigued by the insistence on rule of law.
It's not important.
Those are your words. You see, when we talk here, we are talking to the entire world. And I've also got feedback that our viewers like to also learn, not to hear anti-government and pro-government. So let's talk about the rule of law that we have really mentioned and mentioned. First of all, I believe in rule of law. You see, rule of law is a birth from the United States. Because United States, the Europeans went to America and uprooted the Red Indians, who were the inhabitants. So the Bafurichi, the migrants from Europe, were in all sorts of cultures. The English, the Irish, the Germans, the French, the Italian. Later on, the slaves came. And later on, the Chinese, the Indians, everybody. Now, America has no culture. It's a melting pot of everybody. So the only thing hanging on people is law. That's why I said rule of law, rule of law, rule of law. UK, people migrated from the mainland Europe and went to England and crystallized its civilization over centuries and centuries. So people know do's and do nots. In UK, it is the only country without a written constitution. Why? Because the over-reliance of rule of law is not there, because people know do's and do nots. So you differentiate the genesis of rule of law with the US system and the UK. That's why UK doesn't have a written constitution. So all said is that to harmonize conduct, we have law. We should do it. But I also want to say, we have norms, we have practices that are developed over time in a given society, and they are strong. And that is why in Uganda we have written and unwritten law. But the law says where written law conflicts with unwritten law, the written law prevails. For example, where we have in Lano, that if a daughter of a man is impregnated outside marriage, the child becomes that of the grandfather. But if there is a written law saying a biological father is the father, then where a written law of biological father conflicts with the unwritten law of the grandfather, then the written law prevails. So I want us to insist.
We also have customary law, which is unwritten.
Yes. I want us to insist, but also for the purpose of the viewers, to understand this concept of rule of law. That is really an American thing because of the category.
Heterogeneous group
of
people.
But in UK, it's not that. Because
they're homogeneous.
They have a crystallized civilization developed over centuries. So while abide by harmonization situations by laws as made by Parliament, we should also know the genesis of rule of law. Now, in the case of the walkout, I would think that if we try to think a way forward for a case of posterity, I mean in future, is that each of us would have his own views. But I think the mischief which will be guarded is, are you going to guard against a group of people and twisting the whole country? For example, if tomorrow we have 20 members of the opposition and the 90, the other 350 or 330 is one party. Let's say, what is this party of Mugisha Muntu, for example?
NT.
If NT had 330 people, 530, and then NUP had 20. Are you going to say 20 people should twist the whole country? So as we make laws, we all know that for us in NRM, at least we believe that we don't live in hard and frozen situation. We are dynamic and accommodative to any amendment or any new law. But before you make that law, you'll have to check the mischief. What are you curing? Are you going to put a law in place where 20 people walk out of parliament and the whole country is tied? How do you check vis-a-vis majority rule? Are you going to sacrifice majority? I am not about to preempt what will be discussed, but all I know is that the mischief will be identified. What are you trying to address, and how is it? So as a way forward, I just like to say, by parting shot, that is, that the walkout of the opposition members of parliament is democratic. It happens all over the world. It is part of democracy. They have chosen to express it by walking out. They could have chosen to debate it on the floor. They could have chosen to vote it. So much as they have walked out, it is not the first time. I know the leadership of parliament will handle, and government is concerned. We really want a consensus for Ugandans. So no need for worry. It will be handled.
Thank you. Yes, Chris, your parting shots.
For me, since I just jumped into this particular segment, I actually think that when we are trying to look at some of these things, we should also look at the kind of state we have. For me, by the way, nowadays talking about democracy in Uganda has become very hard for me because I am completely confused. Because while you talk about democratic institutions, rule of law, NRM insists on their 10-point program, top of which was democracy, you find that the country is going into a dynasty. So now I completely, and I am not actually surprised. In fact, my only surprise is opposition has worked only once in these 2 years. Opposition in Uganda should have actually moved out more frequent, because I don't think this is the first.
Going heavy.
Yes, because this is not the first injustice that
maybe
that
they've
is there in the
tried other
country.
means.
Yeah, I think they have. I think maybe they have also tried, because people have said that the leader of opposition, that is a review or assessment of him. People say he maybe among the NUP leadership, because NUP controls the opposition. They say maybe for him he's a bit cold-headed, very moderate in approach, diplomatic in his approach to issues. But I think where Uganda has reached, me personally,
They should be
I
walking
don't.
out every day.
No, I don't. I don't even have hope in the political class, whether on both sides, whether opposition, and that is where I think citizens need to actually take their responsibility seriously, because all this behavior we see in parliament emanates from the citizens. They are the ones who receive that alcohol, that 500 shillings, and then bring in some of these people who are not even supposed to be members of parliament, but maybe perhaps they have very good local interaction with them in their constituencies, and so they become a national embarrassment, making laws without any evidence attached to it, and then also doing all these kind of machinations, which actually is a recession of our democracy. So me, I actually think Uganda, unlike Major Awich, and I know he will not agree on this, but me, I just see Uganda sliding back into a very terrible situation.
All right.
Yeah.
We are due for a short commercial break, but just don't move a muscle. Coming up next is the question of Balaalo. in northern Uganda. See you shortly after this.
The Citizens Chatroom happens every Friday at 2 p.m. on Civic Space TV Online on Facebook and YouTube. We invite you to be part of this conversation. Civic Space TV, freedom always.
We'll be back from that short commercial break. Let's shift gears immediately to the second part of this afternoon's show, which is the question of the Balaalo in northern Uganda. And like I gave the preamble earlier on, it has been an issue for some time now. There have been attempts to address the issue to the extent that even the president issued an executive order, that the Balaalo should vacate that particular place. We don't know if that has been enforced, but what we know for sure is that the community is quite disgruntled and conflict continues to brew between these two groups of people. And well, that's why we shall delve right away, and I'll begin with you, Chris Okidi. Yeah, I know you come from Acholi, and these are issues that perhaps are not just for the purposes of this discussion, but also I think they mean so much to you as a person. So I don't know, for the context of it, what do you know about the Balaalo Acholi issue?
Oh, yeah. I think we are discussing, by the way, the issue of Balaalo at a very interesting time where we have the Jewish-Palestinian question. Yeah, because the Acholi Balaalo issue is a land issue. And likewise, the Jewish-Palestinian question is also a land conflict.
Yeah,
yes. And in fact, recently, I was actually telling a group of young people who had approached me that they have a map of all minerals in Acholi sub-region. So they wanted me to see. Then I told them that, you see, what is happening between the Acholi and Balaalo? The Acholi and Balaalo are actually setting up themselves for a future conflict like the Palestinian and Jewish question. And I'm going to give you the reasons why I make such a statement. Already, the land holding in Acholi. Land in Acholi, most of the land is communally owned. I am not saying that there is no land which is privately owned, because there is also one misconception that people have. People think that all customary land is communally owned, which is not the case. There are some customary land that is communally owned, but there is also customary land that is individually owned, because customary land tenure is a land holding system recognized by the laws in Uganda. During the break, Major here was telling me that he has land and his cows, and he actually wants to go and see them. I am sure he owns the land. So the question of private ownership of land in Acholi also actually exists, whereas most of the land is communally owned, and those communally owned aspects of land are those that we used to call team, joint hunting grounds, Now, those are jointly owned swaths of land. Now, the argument of General Salim Saleh and some of the actually elite that he's working with, their argument is that when you compare land in northern Uganda, when you compare land holding in Uganda, you find that the Baganda have the biggest land size, followed by the Acholi. The Acholi, I think, is about 11,000 something miles, something like that. Those statistics are there. Now, the argument of government through its representative, Salim Saleh, who is on the ground, is that the production in the land is not commensurate to the amount of land. What is he actually saying? That land in Acholi is largely redundant. So there is need to engage. That is how you find him working with some Acholi elite, including Professor Otunu, which is an argument I have had them advance. But the So, meaning there are two issues here. Now, for them, they are actually looking at the economic imperative of it. They are not looking at the social imperative. And yet the social imperative is where conflicts emanate. Now, today, you find that there are very many Balaalo who have gone and acquired land. And you know there is an economic problem. Now, that economic problem is the reason that is driving people to sell their land. And the question, therefore, is, what does land represent? Land is more than just the property you see. Land is actually part of people's culture. Have you asked yourself why there is the word agriculture? Why there is the word culture in agriculture? Because food is part of culture, and land holding is part of culture, and that is why the products out of land is therefore then called agriculture, because land represents more than just the property value it has or the economic value, but land is also a cultural asset. And that is why, and this is the and by the way, this is the African perspective of land. In Acholi, they say land holding in Acholi. The person who owns land in Acholi is either someone who is dead or someone who is not yet born. Whoever is alive just has usufructuary rights. Why? Because the land is supposed to connect generations, cultures, ancestry, and all those aspects. Even when you follow there is even jurisprudence in the African Court on Human and People's Rights. When the Baringo people in Laikipia district in Kenya took the Kenyan government to court over the issue of their land. What was their argument? Their argument is that once they are dispossessed from that land, they are going to, those land have their spirits. It is connected to their spirituality. It is connected. It is where their ancestors are buried. So they needed to protect that aspect. So when you're now looking at land, you may focus on the whole question of economic imperatives, such as capital. Like, of course, I understand government, when they say that the land is big, but it is not commensurate. What should they have done? What they should actually do is just to find a way on how they can make the land be productive for the people, but not to dispossess them. Because what is now happening is a vulnerability that people are selling their lands cheaply to the Balaalo, and then that is actually where, and in fact, this is what I call, we need to be conflict sensitive in policy, because you're actually setting up an ethnic group with another ethnic group for a future conflict. This is how the Israeli case happened, because as early as 1892, when the Ottoman Empire was collapsing, what happened? The Israelis, the Jews, with the help from some of these countries and their Jewish businessmen, went and started buying land in Palestine. You see? They went and bought land. The first group arrived in 1892, what is called the First Tulia. And then after the pogrom in Russia in 1894, another group went. And then after the Basel Congress of the Zionists in 1897, thereabout, that is where now there was a mass influx into the Jewish question. And now you've seen there is a question of identity, there is resource competition over land, and definitely that is what is going to happen in northern Uganda, because people are saying that we are poor, we cannot make our land derive, we cannot derive value from our land, and therefore maybe there is another ethnic group in connivance with the political elite trying to come acquire land from them, taking advantage of their destitution, and turning the land into more economic value and use. And for me, I think that is where the whole contention is.
Okay. Let me hear from another son of the soil. Retired Major, what do you know particularly about the conflict? Chris portrays it as sort of I don't want to say, okay, no, I might be off guard if I say state inspired, but he seems to say that the state has somehow played a role in finding the conflict where it is today. So I don't know, what do you make of the issue happening?
Like I said earlier, our viewers, which is global, who also want to benefit from some knowledge that we have about particular issues. So I would give a minute or so to the history of Balaalo, or who are the Balaalo for that case. Now, the Balaalo is a loose term used to nomadic people who move with cows, and particularly in reference to the Banyankole Baima and the Banyarwanda, and mainly Banyarwanda Tutsi. But also the Basongora from Kasese, who are also cattle keepers, sometimes are loosely referred to as Balaalo. And these people have moved, they have moved over a period of time. They used to cover the entire northern Rwanda or northern Tanzania, came through to Nankole, went through what is called the cattle corridor to Nakasongola, and went to the north. In the past, the Balaalo used to go without cows, and they would look after people's cows. And the payment was in terms of cows. My grandfather had Inutuku. They used to have them. And some who went came back very rich. For example, a man called Kagabu. Kagabu settled finally in Kigoma. He had 8 kraals of cows. 8. He was a very rich man, and his cows are there up to today. So this is the historical context of who we are calling Balaalo and how they used to. Now, the recent trend of events is that the nomadic people who are moving are not moving to look after people's cows, but they move with their cows. They have their argument, and I wish we had invited one here to speak for himself. But part of their argument is that they buy land, they get from friends, it is consent, it is all that. They have their valid argument that, look, I was talking to one yesterday who said, do you imagine that in one village in Acholi, people wake up in the morning and find Balaalo with cows there? Can it happen in 2023? They say no. The cows or the people who go with consent. That is their argument. And that's why I repeat, I wish one was brought here. So by definition, these are the Balaalo, and this is their history. Now, I just like to comment about what he said, the Professor Tunu argument, that because the land is idle, and therefore you make good economic use.
That is Salim Saleh argument.
How I wish. You see, in family law, there's a provision in family law that, should I give this example to my Guarantari? If I had a child with Sarah, and I'm a billionaire, and Sarah is poor, it's not enough for me to go to court and say...
Why didn't you put me as a billionaire?
No, but it wouldn't make sense in this law. If I had a child with Sarah, and Sarah is a poor lady, and I'm a billionaire, it's not enough to go to court and say, this woman is poor, I am rich, give me the child. The law provides that, okay, now you have the money, the court will get that money from you, empower this woman to look after her child. So how I wish the landowners who cannot use that land because of their lack of resources were empowered to use the land.
Than take it, than grab
Than
it.
take it. Just like you get a woman, you are produced with a child, and she's poor, and you are telling court, this woman is poor, give me my child, I'm a billionaire, I'm going to... No, the law says that money, court will give order for you to give on a routine basis, monthly or otherwise, let that poor woman look after the child. How I wish it was done that way, but that is my opinion. Now, On this matter, I like to, just like I quoted the American statement, I like to quote the president's position, because that's the position. And this is contained in the executive order number 3 of 2023. So this is what President Museveni
Issued
says.
when?
Issued on the 19th May 2023. This is what President Museveni says. He says, then there is the issue of Balaalo. These are indisciplined cattle keepers from Ankole, Mpororo, ancient Bunyoro, parts of Congo, Karagwe in Tanzania, and Rwanda, who moved from their traditional areas and moved to other areas of Uganda, but do so in illegal ways. Having learned the techniques of some modern farming in the cattle corridor, they come to acquire land in the areas of Uganda that have not been their traditional areas, e.g., Acholi, Lango, Teso, etc. The problem is that they come to those areas illegally or manipulatively. There, the mistakes are two. First, they claim to have bought land from so and so. The problem, however, is that land in the north is communally owned for most of the time. With such land, nobody can legally sell it to anybody without the permission of the clan or family. These sales are therefore null and void. Secondly, even if they were to be legally owning the land, nobody should bring livestock to an area if he has not fenced the land, provided water, etc. Otherwise, that livestock will commit the sin of okwonesa, in bracket, cattle tripling the crops of wananchi. I, therefore, completely ban the illegal presence of Balaalo in the northern Ugandan districts. This does not mean that the Balaalo, like other Ugandans, cannot buy land and settle in northern Uganda. However, on account of the two mistakes above, that right cannot be enjoyed. By the authority of this executive order, no Mulalo should settle and bring cattle to northern Uganda, except with the permission of the Minister of Lands and the Minister of Agriculture. Those ministers can only give that permission if the two problems are addressed. I therefore direct all government agencies to ensure that these Balaalo are expelled from the indicated areas by the end of June 2023. The Attorney General should also bring a draft of law criminalizing nomadism. A wrongdoer could serve 7 years in prison for bringing cattle to northern Uganda illegally. The Attorney General to also provide for the confiscation of cattle or Balaalo involved in entering the indicated areas illegally. So this is the position of the president. I've quoted it.
In verbatim.
Verbatim. Having given there, I've talked of three things. One, what I borrowed from family law. Two, I've talked of the history. And three, I've quoted the president. I believe for now, my position of Balaalo ends there.
Okay, thank you. Doctor.
Yes, please.
What is your own context? The two gentlemen have given us theirs. What do you make of this conflict?
The Balaalo conflict, other than the historical origins of Balaalo and the definitions of it, it used to be a way, of living, because we have nomads and sub-nomads. The Balaalo that Afanda which defined, who come to take care of other people's cows, are adjusted, by the way. But Balaalo usually are nomads or sub-nomads who move from one place to another in search of pasture and water for their animals. So the naming, the calling of a Mlalo, of a person who has come to help you attend to your cattle, is just in reference to the main group of the nomads or sub-nomads. Sub-nomads move in seasons. Like a dry season has come, the pasture where they've been has run out and water, so they move according to the seasons in search for cattle. The pure nomads, they had no place of settlement. They were always moving in search for pasture and cattle, and they would settle where they found it, and if it's done, then they continue the search. So these are the Balaalo, original Balaalo that we are talking about. The, the first problem of Balaalo, there's a document that defines the problem of Balaalo in 2007 as the mystery and politics of NRM Balaalo, because the problem became prominent. Originally, these Balaalo were held in the cattle corridor in Ankole. And that's what the president is referring to, that they are originally in Ankole. But we also have Balaalo now that have come in from other countries, as I mentioned. So in 2007, we had the problem of Balaalo encroaching on land for Queen Elizabeth National Park in Western Uganda, then those that moved to Bireete, Changwanza, and Chiboga. And then government stated that they were planning to resettle those Balaalo in Changwanzi. The Buganda Ruchiko even made a resolution that Balaalo should not be settled in their territory, but the resolution was ignored. This was in July 2027. So that's when the politics of Balaalo now resurfaced as a national crisis out of the cattle corridor. When you move from that, even in 2007, the Balaalo were said to move with arms, and their movement with large herds of cattle was facilitated in trucks. So they don't move on foot for you to spot them. They move in lorries, they move in fusos with their cattle. And my contention, or my position has always been that how does one move? Because even if you are moving with one cow in Western Uganda, you must acquire a permit for that cow. Where are you taking it from? Where are you going, and what is the reason? Has it been bought? Are you going to graze in somebody's farm you've hired, or you are giving it to a family friend? And that information is contained in the document that allow you to move with just one cow. So how do we have a situation of roaming Balaalo? Who allows them to move, and why? Because they cannot move without the notes of security. Even if cows are in a truck, traffic police would see them. And if they don't have clearance, then why do they allow them to move? That's where the first problem emerges. So when you come to the issue, the secondary emergence of Balaalo, we had a situation of border redemarcation between Tanzania and Uganda. And some of the cattle keeping tribes or culture, where the people caught in between the border redemarcation and they were expelled. So we had another exodus of people moving with cattle from the border contestations between Uganda and Tanzania, coming in through Mutukula and other areas. So these migrants that Tanzania expelled after border redemarcation, but also the undocumented migrants from Burundi, Rwanda, and Uganda that were expelled. Some of them were cattle keepers, and they moved with their cattle. So when you have this movement of 2010 and later 2013, the question is, where did these people settle? How were they resettled? Do we have documentation? Because we know government has public land that they can use through the Uganda Land Commission to resettle such people. In December 2010, there was an effort of first eviction of Balaalo from Bireete. And this eviction raised contradictions in terms of state policy and directives. And they were being evicted from 100 hectares of distributed land from Block 2 of Taro Oil, the oil blocks in Bireete. So where did that batch settle? Are they the ones that crossed through Teso, Lango, settling in wetlands? And what is that movement? And how come government does not track it? So that's why some of these documents are documented, the mystery of NRM and Balaalo. Because how come government does not detect movement of group of persons with large herds of cattle? Are there no an accomplice? So when you have this combination of people movements unaccounted for, And then the dynamics of land in the areas where these people go. For example, there is a clip that went viral where people were chasing a Balaalo woman in a district in northern Uganda, and people had gathered the village saying, you cannot take our land. And you are saying, I bought the land. So how do you buy large chunks of land in northern Uganda?
So
Because
Mulata, actually.
even if,
It was Amolata district.
yes, because even if land can be private under customary land, how would you buy so much chunks of land? Can that still be private customary? I don't think so. If it is communal customary, has the clan agreed? Has the family agreed? Has everybody signed for you? Was there a clan meeting with minutes? Because these are elements of forced territory, land acquisition, and it is economic. So when Chris talks about, first of all, genocide, I don't know whether is a presidential advisor. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Because I was going to ask that, which agency does he represent? Because usually he works for agencies outside.
He's the de facto
no
vice
more government.
president
I
of
know.
Uganda. He's the de facto vice
That's
president.
another mystery. That's another mystery in our governance. So, but this now is a presidential advisor. That's an official title. The rest of the titles usually don't have government
But he's
structures.
vice president, we know.
Yes.
Yeah, so when you look at the economic dynamics, first is land and acquisition of territory. Second is dominance. Dominance of a particular tribe in another. The third is economic. Because as actually people are deprived of their land, we all know the poverty levels in northern Uganda, they are among the highest. Then what will happen 10 years from now? It will be worse for indigenous actually people.
To be destitute.
Yes. So these are the political questions that should be answered under the Balaalo question.
Chris, speaking of political questions that Sarah's ended with, we have had the statement by the president, very strong terms. I mean, he attempts to, in fact, he uses the strongest terms to condemn the actions of the Balaalo. But do you feel the political will? Do you, beyond the statement, beyond the pen and paper, do you feel the political will is actually there to address the issues that is causing this conflict?
Me, I always tell people that President Museveni is a grand master of chess. He is a master of strategic ambiguity. You know, he can be very ambiguous. You've even seen how he's dealing with the global, geopolitics of the region and the globe, especially some of these LGBTQ issues, and then the polarity of the East and the West. So Museveni is a grand master of chess. So, and I am sure nowadays everything he states, he puts in paper, is well calculated not to, first of all, injure his own longevity in power, because that is his motivation. And you know his recent found love with the people of northern Uganda. In fact, President Museveni, by the way, in the next, if he's not in Gulu today, then in the next few days he should be in Gulu.
Yeah, but does that solve the
and
problems?
that no, but that is probably the third time he has been is going to be there in just a space of 2 months. You see that? So I think President Museveni is very careful because the fact is President Museveni has lost Buganda, you know. Yeah, the NRM has lost Buganda. There is no way he can even imagine defeating Kyagulanyi in 2026 in Buganda. And so he's also trying to shift his gaze to the north to try to see if the north can compensate Buganda. So the way in which he's dealing with this, because Sarah actually puts it very clear, the politics. You see, when you're looking at the Balaalo, look at it from a political lens. I was just careful that I didn't want to enter into very deep very deep political sentiments. When I was Guild President at Gulu University, I used to be very close to a DP professor. You need to know that my background, of course, is the Democratic Party. And I've actually been its former national youth leader. So meaning that I have also been with very many political elders from northern Uganda who have actually mentored me. I've actually worked with all politicians in northern Uganda, Mao, Ochora, Bigom, everyone. And then there was one who was a professor at Makerere. He was a member of the CA, Constituent Assembly, but he was a DP, called Leandro Komakech. Senior, not the Leandro Junior.
Are they two related?
No, they are not even related. Leandro Senior was the CA delegate for Aru, where Odongoto used to be the MP. And in fact, he competed with Odongoto's father to represent Aru in the Constituent Assembly. Now, I was very close, and I used to go to his home. And then he would tell me very deep political sentiments that some I want to bring here. Maybe it can help us with context. He said that there is a group, the political elite that currently runs Uganda itself is not grounded in Uganda. That it is very hard to say, let me go and trace President Museveni, like the same sentiments that Obote used to give us. That now President Museveni, who is his great-great-grandparent, let him tell us, you see.
Does he even mention his grandfather?
No, he doesn't. So, but this is what happens. Leandro Senior used to tell me that the current political elite of this country have are not grounded in terms of ancestry in Uganda, you see. And then we have also had a lot of speculations. And when Awich says the Tutsi, Bahima, Angola, now the configuration of the Balaalo, who are these Balaalo, the configuration. When he says Tutsi, he says these are some Bahimas who pastoral communities, pastoralists who move. And then they also tell you that the present political elite of the country does not have ancestral grounding. Then that is the beginning point to now begin to understand what are the pushes. The question Sarah is asking, how come it is very easy for them to access these places? But then you also need to look at our context from, you need to know that when we talked about saying that the Balaalo have been a part of northern Uganda society for quite some time, which is actually true. But remember the then Balaalo we were dealing with them within an agrarian context.
Yes, and mainly as helpers.
Yes, as helpers within an agrarian context. Because our societies were agrarian, and they were not even paid by cows, they were paid by milk, you see? Yeah. Yes, that is how you have people like Aronda, study at Kidgum High, was part of that community. And by the way,
wasn't that part of the national policy under UPC? Where people would study from a different part of the region than where they are from.
No, but for the Balaalo specifically, because they were part of that society, they also accessed education within those. And there are quite many people that you can mention who studied, took advantage of all this. Now, when you look at that agrarian context, remember that our societies have since shifted. We are now a semi-peasant, semi-agrarian society. In fact, we are making a transition to a modern economy. And capitalism, of course, already comes in. And you know, capitalism brings in its own forms of agency, has individuality. Now, the individuals, now when you're looking at when you're looking at the whole question of capitalism, remember that there are cultures. But then you're going to be dealing with capitalism in a cultural context. And by the way, if the arguments of the Salim Salehs around productivity is to hold water, I don't think it is a bad idea. I've actually always told people that the President Acholi's biggest issue right now is balancing between land and capital. You see?
But do you
Culture
take over their
and all
land?
this. Yes, that
Because
is why I'm saying
they can't develop it.
no. What I'm saying is that the only approach, the only missing approach, why we suspect the ruling elite is because we've seen what they've done with privatization. It is a global program which they messed it up to acquire resources for their own personal wealth. These government houses in Kololo, they acquired them. Now, capitalism is a global phenomenon. And this is what you need to know. Why I say that they misused SAPs for their own aggrandizement, because those are, SAPs was within a liberal context, neoliberalism. And now when we look at capital, because Acholi is confronting the question of capital, how do we turn our land? When I was campaigning in Gulu East in 2021, I told people that, one, do not sell your land. Because land, if you are alive in Acholi, you only have usufructuary rights over land. Lease the land or enter into BOT, build on transfer engagements. These are some of the ways within which you can deal with capital within the context of urbanizing Acholi sub-region. Now, what about when it comes to the whole idea of these community aspects? You killed cooperatives, you see? You killed cooperatives. When cooperatives were there, people's lands were more productive, you see? So you have no moral authority and argument to come and say, to make a production argument. Now, why I am saying that this capitalism needs to be culturally guided and given context is because of the whole aspect of depeasantizing our communities. When you go, you look at you look at land redundant, there are people not working on it, and then you definitely say, how can I use this land? Of course, land grabbers will be wanting to, and then of course World Bank and IMF are also pushing the global food agenda, and then you will therefore find our local elite now hiding, our political elite now hiding within global agenda of production and saying you're not producing enough, so we need to help you to make good use of your land. At the end of it all, they chase away people, and then when they're also talking to maybe some of these Western capitals, they say, yeah, for us, we're already implementing this depeasantization. But what is it? At the end of it all, you're going to have people who are going to lose land. And already, you know, there are street children in Gulu called Agu. Yes. Those are people, because family identity is very important anchor of an individual. You do not have land, you do not have a very strong root, you are going to be a menace to society. And that is how you're going to have all these Agu. So when you're looking at the political economy of the Balaalo and Acholi land, you need to first of all not ignore the fact that the ruling elite in the country may sympathize with Balaalo, because even they themselves have been accused before for not having a very strong root and using government and governance to resettle their people. So the production question is just a hoax and a pretext.
Okay, fair enough. Retired Major, at least one thing that we know about the NRM is its military might. At least we have seen the UPDF in Congo, we have seen the UPDF in Somalia, and the might with which, I mean, like, the might of the UPDF is hard to question. there are those who think that if the UPDF and government was intentional about getting the Balaalo out of northern Uganda, they would have done that yesterday. So what is stopping the mighty UPDF and the strong state that you mentioned in the first segment from really effecting and implementing this order?
Okay, thank you so much. The question of UPDF and eviction of Balaalo is well noted, but I like to comment about a few things my colleague raised. Sarah was wondering how people can move with big number of cattle.
Unnoticed.
Of course, we have a natural barrier of Karuma, River Nile. Therefore, it would even make checking easier. If it was a mass land, for example, like from Mitiana to Nakasongola, it would be difficult to monitor the movement from Mitiana to Nakasongola. But here where there's one route should be easy. But I like to say that there are cattle checkpoints. You even see the signpost. The signpost. Haven't you seen signposts on the road?
Yeah.
So meaning, therefore, that
government is aware.
There's that's why I had said in the beginning that we needed to have called the Muralo here to explain. So it looks like there's a legal leeway that they have been doing lawfully to go. Because the cattle checkpoints are there. So it seems there's a legal leeway which they have been doing it lawfully. But otherwise, there are cattle checkpoints all over the road. You see even the signpost. Now, I like to also comment about my colleagues' view of ancestry from the political elite, especially the current government, which develops from the professor and Obote. You see, if you look at Uganda as it is, we are all migrants. We are all Bafurichi. Even the most vocal MP in Parliament, if you ask now, you'll find he has connection with outside. Myself, for example, I am a clan leader of a clan called Bahokarwo. My mzee is called Okwir. Okwir fought in Second World War. His father is called Obua. Obua, by the way, was the commander of the Langi troops which came to support the Bunyoro. That war of Bunyoro, there's a big military force which came to support Bunyoro. His name is even there in the many songs in Lango as the army commander who commanded the Langi to support Kabalega. Obua's father, Torre, was actually Karamojong. And Torre's father came from outside Uganda. And we traced the whole clan, how they came out from Uganda. So, tracing me, you'd actually stop with Obua, who is in Uganda. The rest came from outside.
But
so, I don't know who now we are calling a Ugandan. Because all of us came from somewhere.
And the same third generation.
Yes, and the same clan. Obua is the grandfather. And the same in the clan system of Lango. Everybody migrated from Sudan. So when we talk about having the second, the third, the what generation, everybody is a Mufurichi. Even if you pick me a vocal MP, like choose at random the one of Kira, you ask his father and his grandfather, you will see him throwing his hands up. Even if you ask Sarah, I'm sure Sarah's grandfather is a Congolese.
Why?
From Congo.
Why?
Because of the migration.
My great grandparents are from Mpororo.
And how do they go to Mpororo?
Mpororo, yeah, but how
were they born there?
No, we can trace that. You see, the controversy.
But you see the issue
the controversy with the political elite of Uganda. We have people who cannot name their grandparents, and the second grandparents and third.
And then disorganizing,
yes.
and then disorganizing lineages that already exist.
Yeah.
No, what I want to say is that everybody can name lineage. But what I'm saying is the third also they are all from outside Uganda. And that's a similar thing in all Langi clans.
No, that one, when you start
In all
about
Langi clans.
Africa migrations,
So
it's not
we are
just
all
Langi.
migrants. So I don't know who we are
When you
pointing and
start
accusing
about
finger at.
Bantu migrations, the rest,
I don't know who we
we
are pointing, accusing
But we are now
fingers
using
when
the,
we are all
we are now using the modern
newcomers.
state. We are using the modern state of Uganda.
So how will you use a modern state?
Now this is, by the way, there is a danger that you're likely to portray this as an ethnic discussion, and also I don't want us to be portrayed as people who are questioning citizenship. We know very well who are citizens of Uganda, and that one is okay. But here our contention is that, you see, societies, families, all societies have their basic units, and these are families. And where do families emanate from? A particular social organization with its own social fabric, with its own lineages, you know. Now, we don't have any problem with a fondling fund in Uganda. That one we have no problem. But the whole question is, but the whole question is,
that is information or what.
But the whole question is, we need to protect some of these things, sensitivities that can actually implode.
My response is to your professor, to Bote, or to whoever thinks that having a third or so generation coming from outside is bad. I have given you an example of a clan, entire clan. By the way, even trace up to the very entrance from Sudan to Uganda, we can trace it. So, in one way or another, everybody in Uganda, the third generation or so, came from outside, with no exception. And they are all clans in Lao, like Oteng, like Ogora, like who, if you trace them, all of them, they know when they entered Uganda. So I do not see why, therefore, it should come as an issue. If you thought it was not an issue, you shouldn't even have mentioned it. But since you mention it, I have to address it as such, that for me, I go to Ukwi, who even fought in Second World War. From Ukwi, I go to Ubua, who fought in Bunyoro. From Ubua, Tore came from Sudan.
You're lucky you can mention Ukwi and Tore.
All of us came from outside, with no exception, that the president is going to have with the stakeholders. That is the Balaalo who are already there, and the actually leaders, including the Chief Justice. But I think the Chief Justice is there in his own capacity as a son of the soil, and also his experience on handling land matters of communities. I hope you are aware that there was a conflict in Agago between the Langis and the Acholis over land. But me and Owindolo, we handled it and settled it completely. It had come to a point where a whole division was deployed because of the fighting. But me and Owindolo, we went there, we stayed there for about a month, and we solved it. So I think his experience and son of the soil is why he's involved in this one, but not because he's a chief
But
justice.
also, in customary land was argued mainly by him in the CA. He was our representative in the CA, Agago.
Yes.
Although it's problematic,
Yeah.
because
Yes.
he's not an individual, he's an office bearer.
Yeah.
Now,
I will
the
comment
question
on
of UPDF and Balaalo. Of course, you talk of the might of UPDF, which is known in the Great Lakes and in the whole world. We have provided peace everywhere. We are a strong army, and we can carry out a task, any task given to us by any commander-in-chief. I mean, by our commander-in-chief. Once we are given an order to evict Balo, it doesn't take hours. The attempt was made by, incidentally, a commander who was Muhima, called Brigadier Kanyesige. Kanyesige evicted Balaalo. He even used a helicopter and faced them. Until I think another political question came to say, hold on, cease fire. But that is not to say there's
political question or political interest?
a political question, interest is yours. So when the matter came up, another order came. The army, follows the order. But Kanyesige, who himself is a Muraro, had evicted Balaalo He used the helicopter. He did everything at a fast speed to comply with the order. So there's no doubt that an order given will be effected. So at the current, I think the meeting is going to take place, as you said, sooner or later, and a new position will be brought. But as far as UPDF and following a command is concerned, it's not because of the inability to do it, but because of the status of the order given. If the order is given tomorrow, can be done like it was being done.
Okay. So our time is fast spent. I want to invite us to make parting shots in.
Before I respond, you are taking up my time.
No, I will.
Please.
I will.
I will not
This
allow
time
you.
I
will give you extra time. No. I will give you extra time.
Mr.
time,
Moderator, I have issues to respond.
Yes.
Time
Okay.
up.
Doctor.
This time up, Sarah.
No. I am saying I'm going to give you extra 2 minutes.
Don't ask me to conclude when people have been submitting. Okay.
Okay. Yes, Doctor. I will give the rest of the gentlemen here a minute each. I'll give you 3 minutes to, yes, make your point and also
Let us start.
wrap it up. Yes, Doctor.
I want to talk about 2 issues. One is the failure to implement the executive order. I have reservations on the regard of the executive order because the president is not a legislator. And if you go under Article 99 of the Constitution, under which the executive order is premised, he can issue a statutory instrument through a minister using an act of parliament. The whole of this executive order does not mention even an act of parliament where it's premised. So I have issues with the legalities of this. That notwithstanding, constitutionally, the 1995 Constitution does not envisage a situation where the president resorts to issues like an executive order. And that's why, for me, the involvement of the Chief Justice is worrying. Because the Chief Justice is not an individual. A class suit might ensue out of this controversy. A public interest class suit to resolve the Balaalo question if the politics of the day fail. So where will the Chief Justice stand if victims are before him for justice, yet he has been entangled in a political process? So I have also a problem with the involvement of Chief Justice Owinidoro in these meetings, in these processes. He should keep his stance away, waiting for the day when the victims will come looking for justice through courts of law. The other issue that I disagree with on the procedure is, even when the executive order has constitutional gaps, people were happy with it on two issues: issue of the forest degradation and the Balaalo, really, which is two big problems in northern Uganda. People thought that finally they would get reliefs from the highest office in the land. So even the illegalities notwithstanding, it has been extended 3 times, meaning that it is a propaganda document and it will never be implemented. In the last meeting, the president was asking the actually leaders to coexist with Balaalo. And most likely in the meeting, he's going to ask these people permanently accommodate Balaalo, and this executive order will never be implemented. I don't want to sound as a prophet of doom, but it's just a political document to cool the tempers of the people, and it will not solve the problem. So what is my conclusion? We have enough laws. While I was referring to movement of Balaalo, if we had, I know in the first segment we talked about rule of law. Rule of law has 3 segments: institutions, accountability, equality before the law. And that prevents injustice, prevents anarchy, prevents mischief, like the mystery of Balaalo, naturally. So if we premise all our dealings as a society under the Constitution, under the laws, where there is lacuna in the laws, amend them, enact new ones. But let's all know what governs us as a society. You are moving from one place to another with the cattle. What is the reason? Is it documented? Can the people who created the movement of cattle tell us what was the reason for movement? Was it to grab land for Acholi? Was there evidence of bought land that they were going to occupy? What was the reason? 2, if you are in Acholi, customary land, communally owned, are you under lease? Are you under private customary land? Private customary land is rarely big. There are only a few instances of big chunks of private customary land in northern Uganda. Aren't you taking advantage of a marginalized population? And then you have a government that cannot protect marginalized people. Instead, it is aiding the exploiters of marginalized people. I take exception with that.
Retired Major, your last words.
I thought the government would say the last word.
Okay, fair enough. Chris, let me come to you.
I thought the incoming government would say that.
Until you become for
after a handover speech, then now the incoming makes the final word. Yeah, but anyway, that was a joke. The issue of land in Acholi, I think, to also be fair to Balaalo, because there is no one from Balaalo in this studio. To also be fair to Balaalo, I think the people of northern Uganda are also culpable, because I don't think a Mulalo can enter your land if you have not sold your land. So for me, I have always told the Acholi elite, the political leaders, that even when you're talking against this Balaalo and land, the biggest, you see, Acholi's extinction is not going to come from Balaalo. Acholi's extinction is just going to come from ignorance, or perhaps, I now understand why Obote had ranked poverty, disease, and ignorance at the same level. I now understand, because what is going to kill Acholi society is just ignorance. Because when you look at the texture of that Acholi society, the Acholi elite are just busy farming. They are nowhere among the leadership. I meet some people who ask me and say, but you guys, the Okidis, when we see you on TV, you speak very serious English, but how come there's a mess in your backyard? And the kind of leadership you present is not even the average IQ of an Acholi person. So I think in the Acholi community, there is also lack of monolithic thinking, monolithic interests, and a monolithic agenda. And exactly that is the advantage the Israelites took to disorganize the Palestinians, because if there is a group that understands their interest and a group that does not understand their interest, the group that knows their interest will definitely take over the other group. Why? I don't think the people selling land to the Balaalo are non-Acholis. They are Acholis. And these are people who should also be...
Because they are vulnerable.
Yes, they should also be talked to in terms. No, the question of vulnerability doesn't come. Every time we are talking to the Acholi community, we tell them lease land, because this land is not yours. You only have usufructuary rights. Land belongs to the dead. The living just have to use it.
And preserve it for the future.
And preserve it for the future generation. The principle of trust in Acholi land, you see. Now, if that is your culture and you still go ahead and sell land, how? You have the option of just leasing it. You have an option of entering, for example, into a partnership with a Mulalo and saying, okay, I am going to offer land on lease. You give me the money, I pay my school fees, because I know they have pressing financial needs like education. But who told you it is only selling land?
They can also hire it for grazing.
Yes,
cattle.
they can. Yeah, they can
hired
also,
you
yes,
this
they
piece
can
of
also
land for
it.
10 years.
So while we blame the Balaalo, we also need to talk tough to the ignorance in Acholi, which is going to lead the Acholi people into extinction. Yeah.
Retired Major.
Well, my last parting is that, first of all, as we repeatedly said, we have not heard from Mulalo himself. And I think we could be answering their question, because we are already mentioning that there's a possibility of hiring. And I have heard some saying they have actually leased it. not bought it. A few have bought, but I think some have leased it. And I think that will explain the situation, and it might come in the other meeting. But I like to give a parting shot by saying that as government, we are happy with the democracy, and especially in Parliament, and we are cognizant of the expression of discomfort by the opposition. It is their right, and we think that we need consensus for the smooth running of the government. But since they have expressed their way that way, it's okay. That we know that it will be managed, and the debate in Parliament will continue. On the issue of Balaalo, the president is going to be there. As a normal contradictions in society, this has arisen, and I just like to assure the public that it will be resolved. We have resolved many more contradictions in the past, and this is one of them, so there's no cause for alarm.
All right, thank you. I cannot thank enough all of you for your time. Chris from Kampala Analytica, Chris Okidi, thank you very much, and the lawyer as well. Retired Major Awich Pollar from the NRM Secretariat, and of course, Dr. Sarah Bireete from CCG. And to the viewers, it's always a pleasure to have you every single Friday to share, thoughts on current affairs and, other matters that are both domestic, regional, continental, and of course, global. Well, until next week, same time, same place, catch you. Bye-bye.